Okay. Other things, the rocking that someone was mentioning, one of the things that I think about when I watch Kelly and Christopher is what a relationship she has. So if she's rocking and saying, Christopher, no sleeping, because he always came to school tired. Okay, he was not a morning kind of person. He wasn't the guy whose eyes pop open. So she was trying to get his behavioral state up to a more active, ready state, which was great. And so she knew ways to do that. And it also showed me the interaction and the relationship, because what happened as she was rocking him back and forth and saying, no sleeping, what did you see on his face? Yeah, he smiled. He smiled. He was enjoying it, and he was there with her. Great. Okay. The active learning, the child has to take some action in order for you to do the assessment, other than interviewing. But in a lot of cases, if the parents tell me that he does something, I will say, wow, that's great. Or they'll say, I know that because. And I'll just keep asking little questions, trying to find out, so how is it that you know he understood? Or how is it that you knew what the next thing he was going to do? That is really an important part. And so active as you can help that child be, it gives you better assessment information, and it for sure is going to give you better planning information. So I'd like to watch another video, and this one is Christopher at home, and he's with his mom. And one of the things that was happening is one of the specialists said, one of the things is I really would like him to be able to roll over and roll on his side, but he's not doing that. So I'd like you to look at this video and tell me if you think he knows how to do it. And then I want us to talk about what kind of sensory pleasure he probably was getting from this activity. So in this one, Mom was vacuuming, and so I already see a couple. I bet he loved the noise and the vibration from the vacuum cleaner. And Michael is talking about the vibration again, possible sound, and seemed to orient towards light on the vacuum, little red light. And when he got close, he loved seeing that little red light because he was close enough that he could see it. He enjoys the noise and or the air he may be feeling. Another great comment. He's quite secure having his head next to it. So obviously he's done this before and before and before with Mom, and she's been consistent. Because otherwise he would not have let his head be that close. That's great. Some air blowing in his face. Right. So you're seeing all the different sensory things. So did he roll on his side? If you say yes, put a green check. Yeah, he rolled to his side. And when I showed the video to the physical therapist, she said, oh my gosh. But it was, again, that thing where there's assessment, but it's assessment in the natural environment in which he lives and does some of these activities. So once again, I can't emphasize enough about the idea that you want to look at assessment in different places, and don't make a judgment that because in our artificial way of having him do something, he didn't get what it is that we wanted him to do. But he was motivated. That's that whole thing about knowing what a child likes. And people that know me, and some of you do know me well, you hear me harp on the child's likes and dislikes and what motivates them, and I will continue to do so because that's how we truly find out how competent some of these children are. Was there a light on the vacuum? And there was a little tiny red light on there. So that idea of familiar routines that he does, and that's a familiar routine he does with his mom, and you could, and I don't know if you could tell by his laughter if you could hear that in the video or not, since I'm not seeing him today, but he giggled and giggled because he loved that vibration. So if we're talking about planning, what are some things, just jot down on your piece of paper, or you can jot them down in here, or however you want to do it, but what are some things you want to make sure you would include as part of activities, how you might accommodate or modify something in order for him to understand it better, to be more motivated by it?
And Kathee, would you repeat that question again, please?
Sure. So one of the things that I'd like you to think about, because we want to talk about Christopher a little bit later, and oh great. So one is using vibrating toys and equipment, things that vibrate. So if we're in center time or circle time and he's a young child, then one of the things I want to think about is how do I make something more interesting to him when all the rest of the kids in the class see and hear and they're all just looking at the book, or they're picking their favorite song, the Eensy Weensy Spider, or whatever it is. Also, things that make sound. I will tell you a little bit about Christopher's hearing. Christopher has a moderate to severe hearing loss. Unfortunately, he has had ear infections probably 10 to 13 or 14 a year for about 7 years. And even within the last few years, he still has ear infections. So his use of a hearing aid is very, very sporadic. And eventually just was not used. But he does like sound. Does he understand spoken language? No, but he does like sound and music. Also, Jill said use items with a red light or colored light, something that flashes as long as he doesn't have seizures, or if that leads to seizures. So those are other things. So I'm starting to get this idea of, okay, in my planning, if I don't have a good idea of what the child likes and motivates him, then I'm missing a huge piece of the assessment. Huge, because it's going to help direct how I'm going to adapt or what things I'm going to add to the activity to make it more interesting and to give him more information, because I want his concepts to develop. Okay. I think I'll hold that question for later. So we have another video, and this is the 4th video. And once again, I'd like you to pay attention to what it is he's doing, where is he looking, what does he seem to like, what does he not like, if you could figure that out. Okay, so one of the things I'd like to ask about this is if I were looking at his communication I'd like you to put a green check if you think that Christopher communicated to the person that was there. Okay. Now, let me ask you this question. What does it take to have communication between two people? And just jot a couple things. Trust, turn-taking, engagement, interaction with the person, gestures, sound, understanding, body language, a message delivered from one person and received by another, a message sent and received, action and response, the facial expression. So there's something else, cause and effect with rapport, right. Rapport or interaction, knowing where the person is. Do you think that Christopher knew where that person was in space? And if the answer is yes, I'd like you to let me know what it is that he did that tells you he knew where she was. He paused and he looked towards her. He looked towards her face. Now, I told you that he can see about 8 inches. He didn't necessarily see her. What he saw was her hand coming towards. It got close enough and it was in movement. For a lot of children with cortical vision impairment, it's the movement that catches their attention. If I just held my hand up flat like this and didn't move it, he might not see it. If I start to do this, then he will. I just saw a young man a few days ago, and one of the things that was interesting is his aunt had a black shirt on. And as soon as she walked up fairly close and started waving her hand at him, he immediately, his vision got caught, and he looked towards her. And that black shirt helped because the movement behind the black shirt for somebody who's fairly light-skinned is much easier to see than if I had this bright red and orange flowered blouse on. If I had that on and I'm waving my hand, it would be much harder for him to see. So that's one of the things we talked about sensory overload, is we visually overload kids. And one of the ways I cannot visually overload is to have something playing on that my hands contrast, or the toy or the item that I have contrasts so they can see it more easily. We reduce the fatigue so that they don't visually get tired too quickly, and that for a child with cortical vision impairment can see the movement also. So in that case with his movement, you want to keep thinking about, she brought her hand in, he knew where she was. He was not making eye contact with her, but he gave enough information, and I think it was Billy who said faced her direction, and Michael said the same thing. That whole idea of, I know about where you are and I'm letting you know. What about a child who's blind and has very poor hearing? How would he let you know that he's communicating with you? They might touch you. So I might, as when I'm doing my assessment and my planning and working with the child, I might need to be close enough to him that my arm may be, or my hand may be right next to his, so he knows where I am, so that he can let me know I want to talk to you. If I'm across a table from him and I can't be available, I can't leave my arm close enough to him, then how does he know where I am to direct his mutual. And for us, we think about eye gaze, but for a child who can't see, we think about the idea that they can tactily, mutually meet So our eyes meet. So if his hand is here and my hand is here and he touches me, that's like we're making eye contact. So even when you're doing assessment and planning and you're doing the intervening, how close do I need to be to him to make it work for him to let me know? So yes, he was communicating. He does prefer the vibrating things for sure. The one thing I know is that that sponge that was kind of a gold shiny color, he actually likes that color a lot visually. But when he compares it to something that vibrates, vibration will win every time. So it may be that he didn't not like that sponge, he just preferred the vibrating ball. Just a second. He may tilt his head towards the sound. If he has enough hearing, it may be, oh, I hear you, you're over there, and this is my better ear, and so I'm going to do that. And I've seen kids do this when they have a better ear. They'll turn like almost around, and you'll think, well, look at me, why are you doing that? And it's because the one ear is better than the other, and I'm talking from a place where he's trying to pick up as much as I've got. Tapping the table or vocalizing. One of the things, yes, and one of the things that I find tapping the table, there are some kids who have such sensitive neurological systems that if I tap and it startles the child, I'm back to the problem of I have to first wait for him to sort of settle down before we can go on, because I've just disrupted his neurological system. So I have to think about, if I tap it, then I might slide my hand under his and tap the table so he knows what I'm going to do. How does he know what I'm going to do? These are all parts of the assessment, the planning, and the intervention. And planning for 1 year can be quite short-sighted for some of our students who have vision and hearing loss and are linguistically and academically behind by more than 2 years. If you have a highly academic student, this may not be a conversation there. But for our students with multiple disabilities, just looking 1 year ahead doesn't help us. And what we do is we go from year to year to year, and we might be doing the same things year after year after year. And so one of the things I like to look at is there a way for us to look a little bit further ahead? Consider what the student and the family and the educational team want to have accomplished in 3 years. This child may have only 3 more years in elementary school, and then they're going to go to middle school. So by the time he's ready to leave elementary, what do we want him to do? And then to back that out into 3 separate years of planning so that we're getting somewhere where we've got a goal, and it's not just a goal for today. And I know somebody was talking about, I want to know what kinds of goals to set. If I only set goals from year to year to year with some of these students, we're at 15 and 16, and they're nowhere near where they need to be. And I don't mean they're nowhere near because we didn't do the right job. It's because we just looked 1 year ahead. And I think sometimes I think it's a disadvantage for us to look just 1 year at a time. It is, and so I'm going to talk a little bit about a person-centered plan. This is very brief, but it is a team planning process that includes both the student and the family, and it assists the team in developing appropriate educational goals for an individual student and utilizing her strengths and her talents and her dreams and her family streams. For some of the kids, it's about the family stream, because that child doesn't know what a dream is. That child doesn't have a concept of that. But when I look at what she likes, what she gravitates towards, then I start to know what it is we might want to work towards. For that kid who just loves the family dog or the family cat or whatever and just loves any animal, then when they get a little bit older, we start thinking about, gosh, can we go to the Petco and look at the dog grooming, and is there something later that they can start to have a simple job around animals? That's why finding out likes and dislikes are important. And for some of the kids that don't have the opportunities, we have to provide the opportunities. And also, a person-centered plan, it's with determining what supports are needed for that student. What are the supports they need? What is the purpose? It's to get to know the student and what he or she wants in life now and later, to understand the dreams of family members, to establish a record of current events. You go back and take a look at, how did this kid enter the world? Was he in ICU for 3 months after birth, and then was back in the hospital for 15, 20 different surgeries within 6 years of his life? And I'm not making these stories up. These are stories of real kids. And to serve as a basis for meaningful educational and life planning. Some benefits: it provides a comfortable atmosphere for the student and family. It lets the person and family speak first, because we usually go back and ask them to talk a little bit about their child's history. It gives educational and other service providers a better understanding of that person and the family's dreams and fears. It offers a visual and immediate picture of that person's situation, because we do it visually. We do drawings as well as writing on a big piece of paper, and then we put it into something that's easier to handle. And it provides helpful information to identify and prioritize. And prioritizing is crucial. Person-centered planning brings together a community network of acceptance and stemming from the respect for the dignity and the completeness of the child. This is not a broken person. This is a person who has some needs, but this is not a broken person. And when it is done and followed through on, here's the biggest problem with person-centered plans. People do it, it gets put into a document, and then nobody looks at it again. And it should be a document looked at often. And I don't mean once a year, because it gives us, if it's done right, it gives us a whole lot of information to use. And I never know where to put that person-centered plan, because it's an assessment as well as a planning tool. So I sort of put it in the middle of planning. I'm not sure that was the right person, the right place. So planning. If the student is academic and in classes with his same age peers, consider environmental and learning adaptations that the student must have. They may need additional time, so things have to be at their pace. Visual adaptations for some students, auditory adaptations for some students, additional staff support such as an interpreter is possible, or a note taker, shortened assignments. Do I have to answer all 30 of those questions when it takes me this long? Why can't I answer 10? And why can't you get the idea that I either know it or don't know it from 10? Consideration of fatigue. With some of the students, the young girl that you saw last week who talked about her interpreter, when she got home, she often would go into her room and just be quiet for a while. She was exhausted after working so hard that day. And the pre-teaching of concepts, such as science concepts. What does camouflage mean to a blind person? How do you explain camouflage? And what is important about knowing about camouflage? There's a lot of things that are important about it. For these students that are more academic, this small percentage, truly. And then if the student has multiple disabilities, in addition to the combined vision and hearing loss, and requires even more individualized learning, then you want to consider some other types of things in addition to what we talked about. Once again, visual adaptations, auditory adaptations, additional staff. Does this person need a highly trained paraprofessional? Does this child need some consultation to the program from a teacher of the deaf or hard of hearing? Do they need from a person who is a teacher of visually impaired or an O&M specialist? Do you need additional assistance from the nurse because of all the medical needs of the student? When you're planning, if this student has to be sectioned and has to be toileted a certain number of times a day, has to be fed, and that's a very difficult situation because she's being fed both from mouth as well as tube fed during the day. You know, one of the things I do is I rack up all the minutes it takes to do all of that during the day. And then we look at it and say, okay, here's a clump. And for one student I've worked with, it was 2.5 hours out of every school day was doing some kind of intervention that was medically or daily living skill, toileting, that was necessary. And then it's like, okay, so when the child's being tube fed, are there some activities we can be doing with him or her? So that's why it's important to do that. You write a full day's IEP goals and objectives for every day when 2.5 hours are used in other ways. The question becomes, am I being totally unrealistic? And the answer usually is, yes, I am. And so if I'm going to do that medically, if I set routines up, and this is the part of the planning again, if I set a routine up for this, for the tube feeding, and I set up a routine for the suctioning, and I set up a routine for such and such, the more I do this routine, the more and the faster it will go because the child understands what's coming next. So number one, you cut down on the amount of time if you are consistent. And I don't mean we just sort of do it the same way. I mean we really do it the same way. To the point that if I'm suctioning, I suction in a certain way. So if I go in and I suction, I go right, I go left, I go up, I go down, I come out, and I go, we're finished. And if in another 20 seconds I have to suction again, I do it again. But I give that student an indication, I promise you, I'll go to the side, up and down, and then we're done. Now, I may have to go back in and do it in another minute, but at least that child knows when it's going to be over. We do invasive things to people's bodies, and we need to make it as easy as possible for them to be able to predict not only what we're doing, but how fast. So routines become an important part of planning. So we've been talking about a whole bunch of things that need to be in place for planning. What natural routines does this priority fit in? What natural environment does it occur in? What preferred activity, action, or item could be used? So for Christopher, one of the activities is they had to do a whole lot of stretching activities and physical therapy things to maintain range of motion, as well as when he got out of the hospital and had a hamstring operation, and he hated them all. Hated every one of those things. And what they did is they found a different vibrating toy for each one of the exercises. So he got to the place where he could put out, because they were so consistent, he knew which one to pick out before they started the exercise. And they were done with the exercise, and he was not complaining the way he was originally when we were in the grin and bear it stage until we figured it out. Scheduling. Okay, so now we've been doing some planning and starting to see the kinds of things we've got to include during the day for this student, and some of the assessments you've looked at. And you've looked at, hopefully, communication and how are you going to make that part of every activity, including those medical routines or daily living skill routines. What parts of the day schedule are non-negotiable? Like the start time of school, that's not always non-negotiable, but generally we think of it as school starts at 8 or 9 or whatever. The end time for school, lunchtime, and maybe there's some other non-negotiables. It just has to happen at that time no matter what. And then what to consider when completing the rest of that child's schedule. How do you do that? What do you consider? When have you done so many things in a row that all require him to use his vision so that he is absolutely tapped out visually halfway through them? Or have you come up with some other activities that allow him to be more tactile and therefore rest his vision? Sometimes when we talk about giving kids a break, we think we need to give them 5 minutes on their own. And all I'm saying is give them a break of doing something different. Maybe it's about moving more. So you need to assess and do the scheduling and planning of how much does he move. Is it in the right environment? When can we do it? Have we scheduled too much? Those are all things that we think about. Just a second. So this is a typical daily student schedule, and the reason I just want to share it is this is what needs to be when you are planning and scheduling. It needs to be pretty concrete. It needs to be, here's the time, here's the location that we're doing this in, here's the activity or the routine we're doing, here are the concepts we're working at. Yes, when we're changing diapers, I am exposing him to when his diaper is wet by having him touch it, and then just get a wipey and, that's antibacterial, wipe his hand off, or this is a dry one, so that the child starts to have the concept of, how would I know when I need to change if I don't know the difference between wet and dry, and you set up a goal for me to do? What kinds of skills are we working on, and who is the person with the student? A lot of you, and certainly when I was teaching, I had several paraeducators in my classroom, and if I am simply sitting there and saying, okay, you go ahead and take so-and-so and go over there, and then you do, I have wasted time, and the child's waiting. And that's sometimes where we start to see behavior issues, because he's just waiting instead of everybody's got that schedule and knows that, oh, it's me who works with him at that time in that activity. And then later you can start to say, gosh, when you're charting progress and you're seeing great progress, now then it might become time for me to train somebody else in the class to do it with him so that he can start to generalize out those skills. But this kind of a schedule is crucial, and I would tell you that if you don't even have a way to begin to wrap your head around this, there is a teacher who is on pregnancy leave, and she just had a baby. Her name is Suzanne Fitzgerald, and she's out of Snohomish, and she has developed one of the best schedules I've ever seen for managing all of that piece of the scheduling and who does what, when, where, why. Kind of thing. So I just want you to be thinking about that piece. And with that, since I've been talking about the issue of activities and routines, I would like, for the last video of today of Christopher, this is a video of Christopher and his mother at home. And this is a routine their family designed and told me about when I was visiting, and I videotaped it. So that we could take a look at it. So I'd like you to look at the routine and listen to what Mom said about the routine. Watch Christopher very carefully once she puts him down in the bed for his nap, and see what he does. And you're going to not see his face, but you're going to see something else happen.
Okay, Kathee, go ahead.
Thank you. So, so here is a mom who said, we try to do things the same way every time so he knows what's happening.
And we tell him when it's time to change his diaper and whatnot. Lie down. We have a little system. We try to do things the same so he knows what's happening. It's covered first. And then we squeak the ball. You want your ball? Night night. Go night night.
So, so here is a mom who said, we try to do things the same way every time so he knows what's happening. Okay? What did Mom do once she laid him down in the bed? What was the rest of the routine? What did she do? There was an object. Anybody want to type in? the same or a familiar toy to indicate nap time. And so that was that kind of bumpy ball, and plus the blanket, bringing the blanket up. That was that bumpy ball, and when you squeeze it, a vanilla smell comes out, so it gave Christopher some information and fed his system that way also. And those are important things. And then when she held that ball there, what did Christopher do when she waited? He reached for it. He brought his hand up, right. He brought his hand up to hold on to it. She waited long enough, again, that wait thing that we were talking about. And in assessments, you need to wait. You need to give the child a chance. So that's another piece. So routines are great because he can anticipate. He knows what's coming next. Mom's done a few things. What you didn't see before that was she had pulled the blinds in his bedroom. And so she said, we always do it the same way so he can start to anticipate what's going to happen. And does he play in bed sometimes? Yes. And she said in the middle of the night, sometimes he'll wake up and he'll play for 30 minutes and fall back asleep. That's not the issue. The issue is, what did we set up? We do it the same way. Support. That's the next thing that comes after you've got the schedule. Remember, the larger the number of people in the beginning, the longer everything will take and the more frustration for the team and the child. You have to have somebody who knows the child well enough to know when his state of alertness is there for his learning, his receptive and expressive communication, how he gives information, and that his progress is observable. And it takes, you need to start with fewer people. And, you know, I can go on about that forever, and I won't. Okay? Get off your soapbox, Kathee. So, now you have the child with a person that he trusts, you in an environment that supports him, doing an activity routine that he prefers, something in there that he has that he enjoys, working on a concept and or a skill that's a priority. What about communication? Did you plan for that? Hopefully you did, because you have to do that. Will there be glitches with this? Heck yes. We all know that. Number one, no day is exactly the same as the day before. And no child is the same way they are every day. So, you know, keep that in mind. And I just want to remind you, we're getting close to the end, and I think that Michaela's going to type in, and we're going to ask you again to go to the SurveyMonkey and just answer a few quick questions for us from today. How do I know what to chart progress on? That's a great question and too seldom considered. I'll see all kinds of charted progress, and it doesn't make sense. So think in terms of, what is it that if I chart the progress, it will actually show what it is we're wanting him to do? And do I need to chart progress on every single thing this child does? And the answer hopefully is no. I mean, you're going to chart progress on the IEP goals and objectives, but that's not all you work on all day long. This is also how you know when to move on to something new, because he's bored and he's got it achieved, or that something is not working. If I don't plot it, and I can tell you that in my own experience I've had this happen several times where I thought he was not making progress, the child I was working with. And somebody said to me, and in one case it was my paraeducator, said, have we charted his progress? And of course I'm looking and saying, well, I know. Well, I charted his progress, and he was making progress, but it was kind of slow in the beginning, and I didn't pick up on that. And that's why charting that progress and making it simple and easy for anybody to do is so important. Okay, this is just a simple example of a data collection. It was kind of like a little task analysis of what it was, and it was just a yes, no, initiates it, because that's what they were looking for. That was one of the goals. It was to get him to initiate more. And then, was he independent or not? Okay? And then did I use hand under hand, that technique that we've talked about of my putting my hand under his to show him something or to guide him? Did I use hand under hand? And then there's a place for notes. So it's just one example. And then using video as a way of validating child change and ongoing for families and staff is crucial. And I've had families say, you know, I know he didn't make a whole lot of progress this year on his goals and objectives, but the video that we did was stupendous and he's made huge progress. It just wasn't on what we identified, which then, you know, sometimes tells us, gosh, you know, but you don't want to lose that. And the parents need to know their child's making progress. We need to know that because it encourages us to continue. Making adjustments. What do I need to change or just tweak for that student to make even more progress? And then all these components or elements of a successful educational program for students with combined vision impairment and hearing loss, student success and progress, and that's what we're after. We're all after that. Now, families want that for their child, and they want their child to be happy. And that is an important part, too. When I'm working with the child and I'm doing things that I know he enjoys, he is happier, even doing things that are harder for him. And if he knows me well and trusts me well, the other thing is he'll do stuff for me that he wouldn't do for a stranger. And so when I go into a classroom and people say, well, what do you want to do with her today? I say, it's not about me doing something. I want to see her working with the people that know her the best and with whom she works the best. And if I have a suggestion, I'll make a suggestion to you during that. But I don't want to work, because they don't know me. Like, who in the heck is this woman? Okay? And she looks just like my grandmother. And my grandmother always grabs my cheeks, and I hate that, you know? So there are all those reasons why it's not appropriate. And some kids are much easier to work with than others. They're more open to strangers. And when that happens, yeah, I love working with kids. And again, this session has been about getting more people trained and experienced and seeing a variety of children, because many of you are just working with one child and you've never worked with another child who's got the same condition. And here's just real quickly, we've got future events, the Infant Early Childhood Ed Conference in Tacoma, May 4th, 6th through the 6th, 2011. We're going to have a one-day training talking about toolkits for working with kids with combined vision and hearing loss. So that's one training. Also the Combined Summer Institute in Yakima, July 12th through 14th, and we're looking at using case studies of actual kids and their families and teams coming and actually having large groups learning from them, which we're excited about. We did a few years ago and got real positive feedback. This is just a reminder of that same book, and then just a reminder to you that we have one last meeting for this part of this training, the Deafblind Success. But again, thinking about Christopher, just take a moment when you have a chance, and you can think about Christopher or you can think about a student with whom you're working. But what are all the things that you know, and what are all the things you don't know? Have you taken advantage of the knowledge of the families? Especially for this group of students, for all students in my opinion, but especially for this group of students. They're a wealth of knowledge, and they have expectations for their child, and they are the people that end up being on a consistent basis with their child. We come and go. I come and go. You come and go. But the families are there forever. And we need to figure out, as one parent said to me, I would just like to go to McDonald's with him and not have him scream the whole time. I just would like for our family to be able to go to a fast food restaurant out to dinner. Is there something you can do? Is there something we can write in the IEP? Is there some way you can help us be able to achieve that? So with that, I'm going to go ahead and once again thank Mary Claire for doing the closed captioning, Katie for doing the moderating, and I saw typing in quite a few things, Michaela for the technical piece, and we're going to have to figure out why I couldn't see any of the videos, but I'm just glad again. Thank you all again for coming and also for your great comments again. Observation is so important, and I'm always surprised at how hard some people think it is, and it's not. You know, you can, if you watch it over and over again, don't hesitate to do that. And remember, please do the evaluation. It'll just take you a short period of time. So many of you did it last time, and we really appreciated the feedback. And with that, we'll see you guys next week. And even though some of you may get the invitation and it says from 9 a.m. to 6 p.m., it's because that leaves us a chance to try to problem solve issues or get on for us. So you don't need to come on until right before the training. I mean, if you want to come in at 3:30, 3:15, that's fine. But I just wanted to let you all know that Michaela sets it up in a little bit different way. And Michaela, with that, do you have any last words you need to say?
Not much. Just don't forget to do the evaluation. Thanks for coming.
Katie?
Nope. Glad everyone was here.
Okay,
see you
great.
Next week.
Thanks, Mary Claire, again for doing the captioning, and we're still investigating real-time captioning if we can do it through this program. So take care, everybody. Have a great week and weekend.
Thanks, Kathee.
Mm-hmm.
Bye-bye.